I want to do my daily book report from
You're so funny.
the Aaron Rodgers bio. I don't
How many
have any
pages
huge
are we getting
revelation.
through every day? How many pages?
I try to do a chapter a day.
Okay.
Because I'm doing other things. So I read a little here and read a little there. Every once in a while, I'll get really interested, and I'll rip through the rest of a chapter. It didn't happen to me yesterday. The chapters about the transition from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. The first season didn't go all that well. They finished, I think, 6-10, maybe 5-11. I think it was 5-11. Lost a bunch of games at the end of the season. Almost lost to the Lions in the final weekend of the season. That was the year the Lions
0-17.
went 0-16.
16, yep, right.
And had a chance, had the Packers on the ropes at Lambeau Field the last game of the season. But I reflect on how stubborn the Packers were about Brett Favre and about trading them where they wanted to trade him. It came down to the Buccaneers and the Jets after Favre unexpectedly returned, although they probably are smart enough in the Green Bay front office to know damn well he was going to come back. I remember when he was on with David Letterman in late April promoting the Madden game because he was on the cover that year.
Yeah.
He said something that made me say, that bleepity bleep is coming back. He's coming back. He said something like, I don't know how I'll feel then when camp opens. I don't know how I'll feel. I know how you feel, Brett. You're coming back. But I think what they should have done, they should have held an auction for his contract in the division. They should have embraced sending him to a team in the division. They were so afraid of him that they wouldn't send him to the Lions, the Bears, and the Vikings. And I don't care if it wouldn't have been the Vikings. Have an auction. Highest bidder gets him. Because they needed to turn the page from Favre to Rodgers. And when Favre came back, when he showed up, there was a huge pro-Favre contingent in the fan base. They didn't want anything to do with Rodgers. They wanted Favre. How dare you turn your back on this guy? So send him to a team that the fans hate. Accelerate that process that we saw in 2009 when he came back to Lambeau Field, and they booed him every time he was on the field. That was the only way to break that spell. Do it in 2008. Break the spell then, because that year, by the end of the year, the fans were not sure about whether or not they liked Rodgers, because here's Favre. If the Jets had parlayed their 8-3 start into a playoff berth, who knows how the fans would have felt by the end of the year. But send him to the Bears. You want Packers fans to hate Brett Favre right away? Send him to Chicago. Send him to Detroit, where the team was ass that year. So I think they misplayed that. They came off as being way too afraid of Brett Favre.
Well, I get it a little. I do. I understand what you're saying there, but being back at the time there, and we know first off how all organizations work. They're trying to have it the best of both ways. Yeah, we want a haul and a lot of assets if we do trade you or whatever, but we don't want to trade you somewhere where we think you're going to do so good and we're going to get egg on our face. And that's what they were scared of, right? Brett Favre is one of those guys like, oh gosh, he'll be determined. He'll be the best he could be. And I think that's where they got scared, that it would come back to haunt him that way, be in the division, something like that. And we know he was still playing pretty damn quality football and still had one of the best arms in the league, if not the best at the time. And they were just in the NFC Championship. So I'm sure, yes, they were worried about that a little bit. I understand that. It was a tough one. And I think, because of the fan base and all that didn't help them, because then that made it even like, whoa, we can't let him go somewhere and win a Super Bowl or the fans will really be all over us and we'll look like idiots. So I know, you're right. They probably could have got more and held some people's feet over the fire a little bit better, but, I think they were feeling the pressure of, Brett Favre and the fan base and all of that and what might happen behind all of that.
The Bears were 7-9 that year without him. The Lions didn't win a game. The Vikings won the division. I just think that it would have helped the fan base snap out.
Yeah, I hear you there.
Around.
Right.
If you really think that the guy is done. And you get more, I think, in trade. That's part of it, too. We know how these teams regard draft picks. I think they would have gotten maybe a first-rounder if they had said Bears, Lions, Vikings, best offer gets him. And then they start outbidding each other. Oh, we can't let the Vikings get him. We want him. We can't let the Bears get him. We want him. Let's offer this. Let's offer that. They could have sparked a feeding frenzy and maybe tripped into a draft pick that would have been a foundational player throughout all those years that they had Aaron Rodgers, but only won one Super Bowl. That was just the one thing that stood out. Having 16 years later to go back and think about what was going on at that time, I think they were just a little too stubborn and a little too scared of Brett Favre, and they shouldn't have been.
Well,
they should have.
We just saw that.
They
with
should
Green
have
Bay.
just said, "Give me the absolute most we can get for this guy."
Green Bay didn't do a whole lot different with the Aaron Rodgers situation either. They were going to be tough about it, and it was going to be certain teams they weren't going to trade him to, and there was issues there, right? So it's a tough one when, hey, the player's special. We're trying to move on. Ooh, are we letting him go a year or two too early to where everybody's going to look at us and go, how could you do this? Look how good he is. Look what he's doing. Look what you did to us and our team. When your butt's on the line, I understand that decision is probably harder and, easier to talk about. That's for sure.
And you wonder if this is one of those factors that comes back down to not having an owner. You get the group think. Everybody's afraid to be the one to stick their neck out and say, this is what we should do. It's all homogenized, and sometimes it's safer that way. I'll stipulate, Packers fans, to the fact that not having one single person who holds the final decision-making without anyone interfering in that process can be detrimental to what you're trying to do. But there's also moments where that kind of clarity that comes from the billionaire who swoops in and says, what are we afraid of? Why are we afraid of this guy? Let's get the most we can for him. Isn't that why we make trades? Isn't that what we're trying to do? Maximize draft capital? You guys tell me all the time how important it is to have draft capital. If we can get more draft capital by sending a guy that we think is done to one of our rivals, and all those fans that are out there wearing their Ford jerseys and grabbing pitchforks and torches, if that will make them hate him, let's do that. So it could have having that one person who's in charge of everything and doesn't have to worry about what this person thinks or that person thinks internally. Maybe that would have been the difference. I don't know. But it's 16 years later. It's just a different perspective. But you're right. The Packers, given the way they operate, they may be this way with Jordan Love when it's time to turn the page on him. We don't want him anymore, but we don't want anybody that we compete with twice a year. And for playoff positioning and division champions to have him either.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a tough one to swallow when you build a team or you're coaching a team and you see a guy that you developed and was really good and you get rid of him and all of a sudden you start to realize, wow, he is still really good. And, man, maybe we made that tough, wrong decision there. Not easy. Not. All right, 2 questions. Is Ian O'Connor paying you, and is it the same publisher that does your books that does his books?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
No, and look,
pulling a quick one here.
No, God, no. I mean, do you really think, number one, I would do that? Number two, do you think I would try to hide it? If I was doing that, I would be very open about it. We have a promotional deal with whoever I don't even know who the publisher is, but it's not the publisher of the Playmakers book from a few years ago. And I've also been a little critical of it. I mean, it really did take a while to get the lawnmower engine started.
Yes,
the first 5 chapters were like, okay, book report from sophomore English class. I mean, it really wasn't anything that blew me away. It was just a bunch of checking boxes. And I almost quit. I almost gave up. But I figured there's got to be some point in here where this thing becomes mildly entertaining. So there, I've balanced out.
Okay, good
maybe
job.
He doesn't want me talking about
it. Now he's just telling you to shut up.
I also found a typo in it, which scared the hell out of me.
Right.
Because I wasn't going to say this publicly, but since you're challenging my integrity, they misspell Frank Beamer's last name. Talking about the Virginia Tech Cal Bowl game. Who doesn't know that Beamer is Beamer? Who in the world thinks it's Beemer? And we all make mistakes when we type, but I know the rigorous process that they go through to get a book ready and how many different times it's read and how many different people read it. And I saw that and I thought, oh my God, how in the world did something that simple slip through the cracks? And it's a reminder to anybody out there that does that kind of stuff. And I'm currently finalizing. It inspired me yesterday. My book that's coming out September 3rd, Son of Mine. It's done. It's ready. But I said yesterday, you know what? I got one more chance to read it, and I'm reading it one more time. I was inspired by the fact that Frank Beamer's name got misspelled. So there. Now Ian O'Connor wants his money back.
Yeah, right. He's saying the hell with you. Like, please shut up is what he's telling you now.
Shut up now.
Don't worry, Ian. I'm gonna every time
fault.
Florio
That's
writes makes a typo on one of his articles, we'll point it out. We'll do.
But that's different.
Typos of
that
the
can
week
be
by
changed.
Florio.
But that's the difference. And look, we have typos and we have a mechanism in place to change them on the fly. We embrace quantity. We embrace getting it done and moving on. There's only so many times you can look at that thing and have it not slow down the process of, getting the chocolates off the conveyor belt. When you have that book, when it's done, it's done. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no change in it. You can't go door to door to everybody who bought it and take a Sharpie or the whiteout stuff, take a good huff of it and then paint over the E and turn it to an A. You're done. So that's the difference. They are a lot more conspicuous and definitely more permanent once they slip their way into a book. Now, I guess they could fix it for the second edition, but there's a lot of books out there that can't be changed that have that name spelled wrong. That's the motivation to getting it right in a book. So, and that's my excuse for having typos at PFT.
Okay, good.
Anytime I
want.
Okay.
You got locked in.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.